Good afternoon and welcome back to Stories with Don, reading Robin Hood. And today we are on chapter 11, and this chapter is entitled The Sheriff Spends a Night in the Greenwood. So let us begin. Robin Hood, Much, Will Scarlet, and Friar Tuck were standing near their cave in deep talk. "I am uneasy about Little John," said Robin. "It is some days since he went, and we have heard no word of him." "No news is good news," said Much. "If the sheriff's men had caught our bold comrade, there would soon have been a noise throughout the countryside." "I am willing to go into the town and see if aught can be heard of him," said Will Scarlet. "Nay, nay, I will go," said Friar Tuck. "I can take on the guise of a wandering pilgrim, and in these garments I can come and go in safety anywhere." Then he started and raised his hand. "But look yonder," he cried, "look yonder! Talk of the stag, and ye shall see his horns. By my gown and beads, if yonder great fellow bearing a sack be not Little John, I am no true churchman." His companions turned quickly and set up a shout of joy as the huge archer strode up to the spot. "Brave lad!" cried Robin Hood. "By Our Lady, Little John, but I am glad to see thee back. And what tidings dost thou bring from Nottingham?" "I bring, master, the sheriff's greetings," said Little John, bowing. "I also bring the sheriff's cook," and he pointed to his companion and bowed again. "And moreover," he went on, "I also bring the sheriff's treasure." He bowed once more, swung down the sack to earth, and its contents tinkled and jangled cheerfully. His comrades shouted applause and laughed aloud to see the beautiful silver vessels and the store of money which were drawn from the sack. "I fear thou hast brought none of these with the sheriff's good will," chuckled Robin Hood, and at that moment up ran Will Stutely with the news. "Master," cried Will, "as I live, the sheriff himself is hunting in Holly Chase. I have seen the train sweeping along under the trees and have run to warn you." "Say you so, Will?" cried Little John. "Then on the faith of an archer, I say that we have the sheriff's cook, we have the sheriff's treasure, and now we will have the sheriff himself." And away went Little John into the forest as fast as he could run. Little John never stayed his flying feet until he came to Holly Chase, and there he found the sheriff riding slowly along in deep dudgeon. Hounds were baying and horns were blowing, but there was no sign that the huntsman had met with any success. Little John hastened up to the sheriff and bent low before him. "Save you, my lord, save you!" cried Little John. "Ha, Reynard Greenleaf!" cried the sheriff. "Where hast thou come from?" "I have followed you to this forest, my lord," cried Little John. What sport, Sir Sheriff?" None, good Greenleaf," replied the sheriff. "We have spent the day with hound and horn, and yet never a deer have we brought to bay." "Why, then, my lord, let me show you game," cried Little John. "I have been in this forest, and there did I see a fair sight, surely a fairer my eyes never beheld. It was a mighty hart, of a green color, and with him 70 in a herd. His horns were so keen, master, that I dared not shoot at him, for fear that he should set on me and slay me." "A wondrous sight indeed, Reynard Greenleaf," quoth the sheriff, "and one that I fain would see. Lead me to that spot." "That I will at once, master," said Little John. "Wend with me, and I will give you a fair sight of that great hart." Little John ran back at so smart a pace that the sheriff was forced to put his horse to a gallop, and so master and man outstripped the rest of the company. Presently they came to a break in the trees, and there stood Robin Hood in Lincoln green, his bugle in his hand. "Lo, master," cried Little John, "here be the mighty hart." And now Robin Hood sounded a note on the bugle, and at once 70 archers sprang from the cover of the trees and hailed the sheriff with a great shout which made the woods ring. The sheriff's men heard that shout and fled. But the sheriff was in the midst of the outlaws and knew that he was a captive. The sheriff glanced about him in consternation. "Woe betide thee, Reynard Greenleaf," he muttered. "Thou hast betrayed me, for thou shalt sufferest for it." "I vow, master," said Little John, "that you are to blame. For if you had ordered your household better, I should have had my dinner at the proper time, and this would not have happened." "Welcome to the greenwood, Sheriff," said Robin, but the sheriff still pulled a very sour face, and looked as if he feared what kind of welcome he would get. But he could not escape. And now Little John seized the bridle of his horse and marched forward, and the outlaws followed him. A march of 3 miles brought them to an open space in the very heart of the forest. Here a great fire blazed in the center of the clearing, and a merry frizzling sound smote on the ears. The sheriff's mouth watered, for he was very hungry, and his eyes opened wide with surprise when he saw that his own cook was busy frying the good venison collops. "You shall have supper with us, Sheriff," cried Robin Hood. "Our fare is but plain, but hunger will be a kingly sauce to this kingly feast, for such it must be when we sup on the king's deer." The sheriff sat down on the foot of an oak and looked around with a harassed air. He had made many attempts to seize these fellows, and now they had seized him. He knew their deaths would have been certain had they fallen into his hands, and he felt his head sit very uneasily on his shoulders now that he was in their power. Presently Robin Hood came up to him. To supper, Sir Sheriff," he cried. "Come, the good venison awaits us." The sheriff went at once, for he was very hungry, and besides, he began to hope that the outlaws might spare his life. It seemed unlikely that they meant great harm to him if they began by offering him a good supper. The meal was laid on the turf, and at first sight of the dishes the sheriff gasped in surprise. The venison collops were being served on dishes of solid silver. "Marry," quoth the sheriff, "here be splendor for the greenwood. I vow that these outlaws eat off plates of silver. The king himself could not be more finely served." But when the sheriff looked closer and saw that it was his own silver service, his jaw dropped in such a fashion that all the outlaws burst into a great roar of laughter, so comical was the swift change of his face. "What is this?" he roared, purple with fury. "Mine own silver treasure? I thought it safe in my treasure chamber, and it is here in the hands of runagate knaves. Ah, Reynard Greenleaf, I doubt me thou art at the bottom of this." The great fellow grinned at the sheriff and said, "Call me Little John, Sir Sheriff. I have done with the other name as a man casts off an old cloak." "Little John?" The sheriff's eye glittered savagely to think how he had been deceived and cheated. His servant, Reynard Greenleaf, had been the redoubtable Little John in disguise, and he had not known it. He flung himself down on the turf, and for a time could not eat for pure sorrow and vexation. But Robin Hood pressed him so courteously, and his hunger returned to urge him still more strongly, until in the end the sheriff made a good supper. Now, as a rule, when the sheriff had made a good supper, he was in the habit of retiring to a very soft feather bed and taking a good night's sleep. But there were no feather beds in the greenwood. "You shall stay with us, Sheriff," said Robin Hood, "and this night you shall enjoy a woodland couch. That is but fair, since your oppression hath driven many a poor fellow to the forest, where he must lay on the poor ground, with scarce a cloak to cover him." So Robin Hood gave orders to Little John, and Little John stripped the sheriff of his hosen and shoon, and of his fur-lined cloak and of his thick doublet. Then a mantle of Lincoln green was given to the sheriff, and he gladly took it and wrapped himself in it. "And now, good night, Sheriff," said Robin Hood. "Good night, is it?" quoth the sheriff. "But where am I to lie? Where is my bed?" "Your bed?" laughed Robin Hood. "It is e'en the same couch as my men will occupy. Look upon them and do the same." He pointed with his hand, and the sheriff saw that the hardy outlaws were flinging themselves upon the earth to sleep, and knew that he must do the same. Wrapped in their cloaks of Lincoln green, the followers of Robin Hood stretched themselves upon the turf, took an outstanding root for a pillow, and fell at once into the deep sleep of tired men who lived in the open air. The sheriff had to lay down too on the same bed, but to him it was a bed of misery. He tried to sleep, but a sharp-pointed root stuck in his side and he rolled over. Now a big stone caught him in the back and he tried a new place. Here there was nothing to rest his head upon, and he moved to a place where a raised turf made a sort of pillow. But now he could not sleep, for he shivered with cold till he shook again. Altogether he passed a most dreadful night, with never a wink of sleep, and he was very glad to see the gray light of dawn show in the east. He now got up and walked to and fro to warm himself until Robin Hood came to his side. "Did you ever sleep on a finer bed in your life, Sir Sheriff?" cried the outlaw. "What think you of our order of life under the greenwood tree?" "This is a harder life," said the sheriff, "than that of a hermit or a friar. I would not live here for all the gold in merry England." "For 12 months," replied Robin, "thou shalt dwell with me. I shall teach thee, proud sheriff, to be an outlaw." When the sheriff heard Robin say that he should be a prisoner in the greenwood for 12 months, he lost heart entirely and gave a great moan. "Robin Hood," he cried, "I tell thee that sooner than spend another night like the last, I would give up my life. Struck my head off and I will forgive thee, but keep me here to live an outlaw's life? No, no, never." Robin Hood laughed. "It is clear you would make a poor scholar in my school," he said. "But what, then, am I to do with you?" Upon this, the sheriff begged hard for his life and freedom, and promised over and over again that in the future Robin Hood should have a strong friend in him if only he might go this time. Robin Hood listened, then lifted his hand to check the captive's flow of entreaties. "Hark ye, Sir Sheriff," cried the outlaw, and his bright eye was fixed on the sheriff's face with a piercing glance. "Your life has never been for a moment in danger with me. But do not think it is because I have respect for you. I have none. But I have respect for your office. I will not lay violent hands on the representative of the king. Were you not set in authority by him, I would string you up on the highest oak in the greenwood. And now I must have a promise before you go. And as the old ballad says, 'Thou shalt swear me an oath,' said Robin, 'on my bright band. Thou shalt never do me harm by water nor by land. And if thou find any of my men up night or by day, upon thine oath thou shalt swear to help them as thou may.'" The sheriff was only too glad to make these promises, and we shall see how he kept them. But Robin took his word and gave him his horse, and led him out of the forest, and set him on his way to Nottingham. So home went the sheriff, sore and aching in every bone, and brooding bitterly on the thought of his empty treasure house. So here ends chapter 11. I hope that you enjoyed it and enjoyed hearing how the sheriff got a little of his due. I hope you have a good rest of the day, that you stay well, and may God bless you. Goodbye.